Hi, thank you for joining me for another lecture. And friends, I've decided to make a quick lecture identifying the religious Jewish world's most pressing problems and then attempt to give the most practical Torah solutions for those problems. And what am I talking about, friends? Well, what if I told you that I could locate and explain the root of virtually all of Israel's problems today? And what if I also told you that all of those problems begin and end in the Jewish world itself? And simpler yet, what if I also told you that these problems could be whittled down to only two? Sound shocking? Hard to believe? Well, friends, this is exactly what I'm saying today. And these two problems, these two areas are Jewish mysticism and the Jewish people's refusal to proselytize Torah to non-Jews, to share Torah with non-Jews. And that's it. These two apparitions that have no basis in Torah themselves and that have only driven the Torah world to the social, ethical, and moral dead end that it finds itself in today. And friends, I'm saying this today as someone who believes in and lives Torah Shebiktav and Torah Sheba'al Peh, but someone who teaches it as well. And the reason I have to make this clear is because many, in a way to discredit any dissent within what's called normative Orthodox Judaism today, will ignorantly and immediately begin to say that this is in some way an attack on Judaism's oral law. When, friends, I have assured you in many of my lectures in the past that unless something goes against a legal, practical ruling made by the Sanhedrin, it in no way goes against the oral law. And the truth, friends, is that most people who make such claims are just repeating the answer that their rabbis gave them. And why would their rabbis give them such an answer? I mean, is it really their fault? Well, not completely. Why? Because, friends, Judaism, as it exists today, or at least Orthodox Judaism, has actually become the most difficult religion to try to explain and trace back to its roots. And friends, I'm really not kidding. I mean, with all that is practiced and believed today, one would have to devote a whole lifetime just to be able to catch a glimpse of the bigger picture. A bigger picture you need to see in order to put yourself in any position to be able to explain what you believe in and why. You're probably wondering, how can the religion that was established to help this world progress out of darkness become so utterly confusing? Well, because so much has been invented by very ambitious rabbis along the way that they themselves labeled Judaism as a supposed authoritative or authorized extension to Torah Shebiktav, the written law, that the only way to justify it is by writing it off as Torah Sheba'al Peh, as oral law. And not Torah Sheba'al Peh how we teach it, as the legal rulings decided upon by the Great Court that the Torah itself tells us to adhere to, but as something that was given alongside the written law on Har Sinai. A concept that, might I add, has been very much perverted. In other words, for someone to be a kosher Jew, he does not have to believe. He does not, like I said, that the whole oral law was given to Moses on Mount Sinai. When actually the traditional belief, at least as brought down by the Rambam in his introduction to the Mishnah, is that the component that is traditionally understood as Halacha Moshe Sinai, literally instructions that were given to Moses on Mount Sinai apart from the actual written law, that these laws only make up around 33 laws in total. And even among these 33, not everyone could agree. In other words, what the Rambam is stating here is that 99.9% of Jewish law as it exists today was established by the court, and that's fine, because the Torah itself commands us to adhere to this court in Parshat Shoftim and many other parshiot, within the mitzvah of lo tasur, the mitzvah of not straying from the rulings of the court established by Moshe Rabbeinu, of 70 judges, 71 with himself, that had the task of translating the mitzvot in a practical manner. Now this understanding and explanation is not only biblical, but also sounds a lot more reasonable than walking around teaching that the whole Talmud as it exists today was given to Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai and in some way passed down orally. An idea that, if honestly embraced, could then open up the floodgates for many more people adding many more books, which is exactly what is done today. Which is what occurs when someone says that even what rabbis say today was given on Mount Sinai. in a way trying to justify their words and their ideas with the pen of divine authorship. Not to mention without a system of checks and balances within what we call authoritative or sanctioned by the divine, there is no way to ensure that Torah will not change, especially when people nowadays have begun including mystical interpretations, legends, and folklore as Torah Sheba'al Peh as well, something that would have been out of the jurisdiction of the duties of the court, i.e. trying to explain or establish the metaphysical. No, my friends, only the Torah had that task. Not to mention that this court never necessarily had prophecy. No, friends, the job of this court was only to establish practical, livable halacha in order for Israel to keep the mitzvot in a uniform manner and not to in any way establish new mitzvot, at least without first making a distinction between what's rabbinic and what's from the Torah. But regardless, friends, all this acts as a huge diversion in the path of those searching for truth. And this can be displayed today by the responses developed to keep scholars from thinking. And this is disguised in many forms and under many titles. For example, the first one I will explain is what I like to call the Holy Spirit argument. And you former Christians out there will know exactly what I mean after you hear it. Now, this argument is also known as the Masorah, Minag, or Das Torah argument. And this response is usually heard when someone is asked to give a source for either what they're doing or what they believe. And they'll tell you, well, they can't because what they received is either their tradition, custom, or the teachings of a local gadol. And that's why they accept it, no matter if it appears in Torah or Shas. And friends, it really doesn't really matter what they call it, because this form of thinking has conditioned the Jewish people not to question their supposed non-biblical and non-halachic sources, not to question whatever they hear from anyone who has been labeled a gadol. And like we said, that it really doesn't matter that there's no biblical or halachic source for what they believe, no matter how silly it may sound with no opposition. And the second argument you'll probably hear is what I like to call the Superman argument. Like, for example, if you happen to ask for a source for what they do, or like we said, for what they believe, and all they do is tie it to a teacher who either is older or has passed away, and if you happen to question that individual, they'll make the famous statement like, oh, do you think you know more than this rabbi? And again, this ends a discussion when no serious analysis was ever made to justify this rabbi's words. Just a statement that he's an Ubermensch, a pagan idea if you ask me. And last, friends, but for sure not the least ridiculous one, is the blind man argument, which can also be heard when asking for a source or, like we said, getting them to explain a position that they don't know anything about and that they blindly follow. And friends, it's a shame that these responses have in some way become praiseworthy in Jewish life, which again is something that will probably be heard if you ask for a source or an explanation for a position that they have taken. And this is the argument when they say that they have chosen to blindly follow a rabbi or a rebbe who has developed such an idea, which in the modern notion of the sense means that you cannot question. And again, my friends, this in some way has become praiseworthy in Jewish life. They'll say, Rabbi Asher, what are you talking about? It's right there in Perkei Avot. Aseh lecha rav. To make for yourself a rabbi. Of course, make for yourself a rabbi. But this, my friends, is not an excuse to check your brains at the door and not to be able to function socially, or even in this case, hashkafically or halachically, without this individual say-so, no matter how ridiculous his advice may be. Which is another reason, friends, you don't get many rabbis challenging my lectures, but only attempting to defame and challenge my character. Why? Because I give sources. I mean, I have to. This is the only way you can make a difference without having a huge financial backing. In other words, I have to sell my ideas to my audience. They aren't just happily believed because of some endorsement. And why am I mentioning all this? Because, friends, these are the biggest obstacles that prevent change. The obstacles that get you feeling that by challenging what is done today, that you are in some way challenging Hashem and or Torah itself. In other words, the way you stop change is by getting people to stop thinking. A notion that's not from Torah and it's not by Chazal. And especially in areas where Torah is desecrated. Which is clearly seen with how converts and the whole conversion process is dealt with nowadays. Conversion, my friends, one of the three areas that Hashem himself says in the Torah that he will personally destroy Israel over by mistreating the convert. But for some reason this we ignore. I mean, seriously? And friends, the purpose of this lecture is to try to elevate you from this nonsensical fear. This fear that by asking questions, by staying on the path laid down by Chazal, that not only endorsed the questioning of what is taught, but in many cases demanded it, know that you are doing your part in building Torah Judaism for future generations, ensuring its survival, and freeing yourselves from the medieval European time warp that current rabbis have us in today. How? By knowing what is fake and what is real and what is Torah, both written and oral, and what's not, and ultimately what's disposable. And friends, another reason why what I am saying is so important is because Torah, my friends, is not only being corrupted, my friends, it's being distorted. How? By the simple fact that not only is it being kept from those who earnestly want it, friends, it is being misrepresented to the outside world. And even worse, it is being displayed to those outside looking in as if this was what the Torah or its author himself had in mind all along. And this is all because of the ascetic nature that Kabbalah has infected us with. And this, my friends, is the second part of this lecture, the complete indifference shown by Jews on whether the Torah's values impact or permeate the world we live in today. In other words, friends, if Torah Jews care about the inhabitants of this planet, they would spread Torah. This is Torah, my friends. Torah, the Almighty's handbook for ethical instructions. Instructions that not only affect some men, but all men. It seems elementary when I have taught in many of my lectures that there's no halachic source to stop us from doing so. None. And the only argument given by rabbis today why we don't do it is mainly because it hasn't been done in 2,000 years. Well, of course it hasn't been done in 2,000 years. But not because the Torah did not endorse it, but because the societies we lived in did not tolerate it. In other words, Christian societies and Muslim societies did not tolerate people converting from their state-sanctioned religions, which in no way should determine how we do things today, to a world who is not only ready to accept Torah, but needs to ensure this planet's survival, to civilize the human race. Friends, when till now, it has only been the scraps of Torah that non-Jews have been able to gather that have ensured the ethical survival of this planet's inhabitants still today. How? My friends, by impacting people with ethical, productive values. And it's really been no thanks to us. These are not my words. The Rambam himself said it, praising Islam and Christianity for at least bringing the non-Jewish world theologically and monotheistically where it is today. In other words, friends, like we said, that the world has progressed this far. It's done so much with so little, with only the scraps that we've left behind. Can you imagine how this world could actually change if we actually gave a damn? Then you'll say, Rabbi Asher, we offer the Noahide laws as an alternative to Judaism. Oh yeah, but who the hell really wants it? I mean, you really think that a Goy is going to trade in Islam or Christianity, full of its ethics and standards, for a set of 7 stagnant laws which Muslims and Christians already keep as part of their religion? No, friends, the first step in being able to visualize progress is first being realistic. For example, we have a law code of over 613 mitzvot, 613 opportunities to improve this world and our lives, given by the Creator himself. And to others, we only offer 7? I mean, even the Torah itself explains the account of Jews huddling before the mountain, accepting the revelation from their Creator himself. And we expect non-Jews to accept a set of 7 laws compiled by rabbis and not the Creator? And they're supposed to be happy with this? Well, like I said, my friends, Jews have no obligation, no halachic obligation to offer non-Jews 7 laws as an alternative to Judaism. None. But because Chabad began this practice, everyone just hops on board? Of course, because since the invention of Kabbalah, Jews don't want non-Jews to convert. So if the 7 laws could be used as a tool to deviate them from the right path, even better. And many will then argue with me, Rabbi Asher, don't you know that the 7 laws were first given to Adam and the last law given to Noah? Friends, if by today you have not begun to make a distinction between Midrashim or Agadot, folklore and legends, and halakha and Torah, friends, you got bigger problems. The truth is, my friends, that Torah works. A Torah lifestyle functions, ethically functions. In other words, by spreading and sharing what is effective is how we progress as a species. And the failure or the lack of interest to do so will always incur a negative reaction of not just what is outside or those who are outside, but even those who are currently within our group. And friends, those who have heard my lectures in the past have probably wondered what fuels my efforts against Kabbalah and against the Jewish refusal to encourage and share Torah with the world. And the answer is that the main reason the Jewish world is not interested in spreading its values is because of Kabbalah, i.e. the unsensical and unpractical ideas spread by works like the Zohar, that has gotten Jews to stop worrying about the practical consequences of their actions, and worse, assume that whatever happens was in some way meant to be. Because as you know, there's no hint in Torah that would lead us to believe that the Almighty did not intend for the world to accept His Torah, just as the Hebrews did. No, friends, it takes a misguided effort and a broken moral compass to ever assume that the Almighty only intended Jews to be good and the Gentile world to only not do bad. Does that sound exemplary to you? An ethical pursuit? And this also goes for this new nonsensical Ger movement that has only added more confusion to the no-eyed world as we know it. And you're probably wondering, how has Kabbalah encouraged the Jewish world not to care about converts or not to care about spreading Torah to others? How? Well, because it was predominantly Kabbalah ideas spread through books like the Zohar that has gotten Jews to separate the world not between good and evil, or the decent or the indecent, but between Jew and non-Jew, teaching that non-Jews are intrinsically impure and Jews intrinsically pure. And it was also Kabbalah who invented the notion of a Jewish soul and a non-Jewish soul, attaching no redemptive qualities to the latter, saying that if a non-Jew happens to convert to Judaism, it's because they were Jewish all along. Basically stating that the only reason anyone would ever adhere to this belief system, to this beautiful set of instructions delivered by the Almighty Himself, is if they were genetically disposed to. How do you like that? And worse, they go as far as to say that every non-Jew is intrinsically programmed to hate Jews, giving Jews the false assurance that there are no enemies from within. And if someone happens to take this to heart, can you really blame them for not wanting to waste their time trying to encourage irredeemable animals to accept Torah? Why waste your time if they're predestined, if they're intrinsically pre-programmed to hate and want to destroy Israel? This is what Kabbalah has brought to the table. But friends, you don't have to take my word for it. Do the research yourself. See if you find any notions of Jewish soul in Tanakh or by Shas. Of course not, because they were ideas invented post the 13th century, when Judaism took a mystical nosedive and unfortunately has never recovered. But today, my friends, you can choose to make a difference. You can choose to return to proper Judaism, which is only Torah Shebiktav and Halakha, in other words, the rulings decided upon by the Sanhedrin, and take this Torah and spread it to the ends of the earth. And if you're hearing me today and you happen not to be born Jewish, I want to encourage you to embrace a Torah lifestyle through conversion. You yourself become a Torah Jew. You can choose to be chosen. You can choose to be set apart. For more information on everything Jewish, please visit bejewish.org. Thank you.